during the meeting.
Oh, thank you.
There we go.
Excellent. All right, good evening. I would like to call the November 3rd, 2020 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. Present, we have Mike Hughes, Tim Bonin, myself, Dave Cortez in person, and we have the illustrious Hal Davis remotely up on the big screen. I don't have any announcements this evening, so we will move directly into the first matter, which is a public hearing for the FY21 tax classification. Public hearing and possible votes. You guys can come on up.
Good evening, gentlemen.
It's that exciting time of year again.
Yes. We all can't wait for it. Hello. Is this on, off, doesn't matter?
Doesn't.
Okay.
Whatever you're more comfortable with.
I believe you've been given this document from Beth. It's the fiscal year 21 classification hearing. Just some information. Calendar year 2019 sales analysis indicated the average single-family home will see a 4.3 increase in assessed value. So basically what that means is assessed value of the average home in 2020 was $325,200. It's going to see a value of $339,300 in fiscal year 2021. The average, as I said, that house will see an increase, a tax increase of $151.20. The single median family home is assessed at $311,000, a little less than the average house. We are seeing an increase of bigger homes in Douglas. In fiscal year 20, there were only 137 houses over 500,000. In fiscal year 21, we're seeing 208 houses over $500,000. Based on this information, we're anticipating a tax rate to be $16.72 per thousand, which is a slight decrease of 26 cents. The reason for the vote is a commercial, industrial, personal property versus residential tax rate if you want to do a split rate. If we were to do a split rate, the residential rate, would drop down to 16.18, where the commercial index would rise from 25 points, would increase from 16.72 to 25.08. The reason why there isn't much of a difference between the two rates is we do not have a lot of commercial industrial property in Douglas. And it is the assessor's opinion that if we were to do such a move, whatever commercial, industrial, personal property business we had in Douglas would leave Douglas. So it is the assessor's intention to keep a single tax rate for fiscal 21.
This sounds vaguely familiar. I think I've heard this before.
And I think it will for a few years to come.
Sorry, we like good news.
Anybody have any questions?
None here. Matt, I know you were looking at this. The numbers become clear to you?
Sort of.
Sort of.
There's a complicated dynamic between the tax rate, the value of the town, and the way we project the levy going out into the future. Since I wasn't really able to satisfy myself, I'm not happy with the town.
This has been the process that we've used for
Yeah, and I know
decades there.
Beth had mentioned that you had a question about the tax ceiling and the levy, and that's, again, it's a complicated procedure, but if you wanted to get into that other than a meeting, I'm more than willing to sit down with you and go over it.
Good. I like that you put that other than a meeting. I can see my eyes crossing.
I deal with the numbers for a living, and it's still,
I think it's an easy choice for us because even if we were to adopt a split rate, if the significance on the homeowner was relatively minor, it certainly would cripple our efforts to bring in more business and hurt the taxpayer that way. So I think it's pretty simple and continue our past policy of not having a split rate.
I agree.
I agree as well. So I'll make a motion that we support a single tax rate for all classes of property. Second.
Excellent. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Appreciate all your hard work.
I think we have some paperwork.
We need to sign.
You have that?
No, they do online.
Yeah.
We're all very excited about that.
Thanks, Tony. Good night,
We
guys.
need a
Take care.
tax rate, so we really, really have to do it.
Yes. Well, we had to vote on it first, so.
Can you tell the website to let me in this time?
I heard websites are excellent judges of character, Dave.
I heard they are too, especially this one.
All right. Second item on this is a discussion to reconsider the Webster Street bid and possible votes. I want to make a reminder, this is not a public hearing. This will be another attempt at it. At this point, when we had gone through this exercise Wednesday, history repeated itself with a math error. So in the effort to make things move quickly, I would entertain a motion to nullify the proceedings and awarding from Wednesday night's meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All, roll call vote, please.
Mike Hughes, aye.
Bone and I.
Morris, aye.
Cortez, aye.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. At that point, what I would look to is Matt has done a fantastic job of due diligence of going through the scorecards, having them checked, double-checked, rechecked, did the math, had his math double-checked, and has managed to go down through the scorecards as originally presented, omitting any points that were awarded into margins that did not rate having points awarded to them. And then, as per the RFP itself, scored those together, came up with a cumulative average and scores that were presented. I think before we can really move into that, I would need a motion to reconsider. Is that what it would be? A motion to actually reconsider the bid again?
So moved.
Second. Nobody seconded?
All right.
You just did.
So the motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on this?
What is the motion? I'm trying to understand what's happening here.
So what happened was is Wednesday, we made a tabulation error
Right.
again. So we just nullified that.
Yep.
So now in order to move forward, we would need to reconsider the Webster Street bids that were presented in front of us. And we would be looking at the summary Matt's put together in our packets, all of the scorecards with a proper tabulation, as well as a cumulative average of those scores. And the purpose of reconsidering the bid would be to award the bid to what would in essence be the high bidder based off of the criteria in the RFP.
Right.
All right, so we have a motion made and seconded. Is there any other questions or comments or concerns from the board?
So the motion is just to reconsider the bid.
Correct.
We're not voting on any bid. We're just
Well, we would be...
opening it up for discussion.
We're opening up for discussion, and then I would enter into that discussion the tabulations that came from Matt,
Should be a separate motion.
which would be a separate motion.
I wonder, prior to going through that, whether there's any appetite to throw the past 4 weeks in the trash can and to start anew. I'm a little concerned in the RFP itself, but then the process in which we came to these numbers, and it's an important piece of property for the town, and I just don't like how this process has gone. I think, to use a baseball analogy, you get up there 4 times, we make it closer to home. The other day, my son batted 6 times, he struck out 5. We didn't make a big deal of it. We told him it's okay, right? You saw curveballs you hadn't seen before, and maybe you didn't prepare necessarily while you were up to bat. The beauty of it is that you can show up the next day and do your best and perhaps do better. So with that in mind, I've lost enthusiasm for this particular RFP and would certainly entertain going up to bat another time.
I understand and appreciate your sentiments on it, Tim. And I think that the time to have done that would have been when we had first opened up the bids to have just rejected all. I think the debacle that we're sitting in at this point in time is that we'd gone through, weighed, scored, accepted the bids as they were. And then the biggest problem that we ran down to was, as embarrassing as it is, was simple math. So, I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, it was mistakes made on our part, we have to own those. But we took two good faith bids and opted not to reject them at the opening of this process when we'd had that opportunity. So I think to do so now would be unfair to both parties. That's just my opinion, but again, 1 of 5 people.
All right.
Al, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
We can't hear you, Al.
There we go.
That's it.
I concur with what our chairman has said. That although the process has been not the smoothest, this is still consistent with the way we set up the bidding, and so I would support following along and awarding it to the double and triple check calculations to the winning bidder.
Mr. Hughes?
I understand where Tim's coming, and certainly I can appreciate how you're feeling, Tim. In fact, at times, I thought maybe I felt the same way. I think what we're trying to do with this whole process is be fair and make it right. And it was a math error, unfortunately. We've made attempts now to correct that. So if we feel comfortable with the scoring, which I'm sure we do because it was checked and double checked, I think that was our original intent in terms of how we scored those proposals.
Mr. Vice Chairman, anything to weigh in?
Nothing to add to what I've said previously. I think Mr. Hughes in particular was very eloquent today.
All right, so let's vote on the motion to reconsider. Can I have a roll call vote on that?
Hughes, aye.
Bone and I.
Morris, aye?
Cortez, aye.
Davis,
Okay. So the next motion I would be looking for would be to accept the summation presented by the administrator, who had done the recalculation with the omission of any points awarded to sections on the score sheet that did not merit points, which would be in the description section. Take the cumulative average and award a bid to the high bidder based off of those averages.
Want to make that a little shorter, maybe?
I would entertain a motion to accept the tabulations and award a winner based off of what's in our packet. Was that short enough?
That was much better.
That was much better. I was trying to be fair and explain.
just to make a technical note.
Technical note.
Selectman Davis, when your microphone is live, the people on the phone call cannot hear the people in the selectmen's room. We can hear each other because we're here, and we can hear you because you're on Avaya. But right now, there's so much interference coming from your mic. We need to mute you, and you need to unmute yourself when you want to speak. Because there are parties in interest on this call who need to hear the selectmen's conversation.
That's fair.
You copy that, Hal?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, there you go.
So you made the motion?
We have a motion, no motion yet?
Yeah, I made the motion. Is anybody willing to second the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. So the motion has been made and seconded. So at this point, I would read through what the scorecards tabulated, and then we'll take a vote on moving forward after discussion. Does that sound fair to you guys? So the scores that were tabulated with the omissions of errors on the scorecards come through with Tessino slash Z&T had a total of 896 with the average of 179.2. Flying Goose had a total of 909 with the average of 181.8. So based off of the RFP itself, the high cumulative average for the scores would go to Flying Goose with 181.8.
Just for clarity, when we vote, we are voting on awarding this.
Yes, the vote would be to accept the scores as presented in the math and then to award the bid as such. I'm not taking anything from the audience at this time, but thank you. Mr. Hughes,
It speaks for itself.
any thoughts, Mr. Bowman?
No, I think we just have to be very comfortable with the votes that you put, or the scores you put down on your sheet, and be prepared to explain those away as necessary.
Nothing further.
Nothing from you, Mr. Cortez. Mr. Davis?
Nothing added.
Okay. So we'll do a roll call vote in favor of awarding the bid as presented in the sheet.
Well, I'll second that motion.
Yeah, sorry. Motion's been made and seconded. I apologize.
Let's be crystal clear as to what the motion is.
I am making a motion to award the bid to Flying Goose based off of the average being 181.8 to the other score being 179.2 in accordance with the RFP and the scoring mechanism attached to it.
I think that's very clear.
And I'll re-second that motion.
Sir, I'm not taking questions from the audience on this. This is a board matter, it's not a public hearing. So, motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing as none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Hughes, aye.
Bone and I.
Morris, aye.
Cortez, aye.
Davis, aye.
So, to the attorneys from Flying Goose and from Z&T or GBI, thank you very much for your time this evening. If there's questions or concerns, there is an appeal process that was explained in the first part of this matter, and we will consider this subject closed as far as this hearing is, as far as this meeting is concerned. Does anybody disagree with that thought process?
Nope.
Okay. Moving on, we have an appointment to Concom alternate member Eric Harris to full membership and possible votes. Is Mr. Harris present?
Apparently not, unless he's on Zoom. Do we have him online?
No, Tracy's on the line. I don't know who that anonymous narrator is. But the chair is on.
I assume this comes with the approval of the rest of the Concom.
I would assume so. Tracy, are you on? Okay.
I think we would have heard if there were a renegade associate member of the Conservation Commission. Therefore, I would move approval that our candidate, Eric Harris, be appointed to the Conservation Commission with a term ending June 30th, 2022.
I will second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. New business policy discussion with EDC Chair Luke McNeil and possible votes. Is Mr. McNeil here? Seeing as he is,
Wait a minute.
wait. No, I think that was Tracy Sharkey hopping on.
Non-anonymous version of Tracy.
I've been trying and struggling to get on the meeting, everyone. Tracy Sharkey.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi.
So we have We've put Eric Harris to full membership on conservation with the assumption that he's not gone rogue or anything like that.
Awesome, yes. He will be an appreciated addition to our skeleton board.
Excellent. All right, as Luke is not here or in attendance on Spaces, I'm going to pass over item number 4. We will go to number 5. At the request of Selectman Bonin, we wanted to have a discussion on marijuana business in Douglas and possible votes.
I don't know if I want to talk about this tonight.
If you would like to move this to a later date, I'd be happy to pass over that item and add it to a future agenda.
Yeah, well, only because we took up the other thing, that it really is not, they're not tied together. I think it just in general, it'd be best to have a clear break between the two. That would be my stance tonight.
I think that's wise.
Yep, I agree.
All over it, Tim. All right, so we will pass over item 5. That'll go to a later agenda. Number 6, Town Council's update on the school lunch program investigation. Attorney Bowen, are you on?
He's not, but I can give you an update.
That'd be great.
Get over here so people can. The email traffic that was requested by the board in its subpoena, as best as we know, haven't really had chance to go through it and check it for completeness and responsiveness, but a very large box full of documents has been delivered to Town Hall. That was yesterday.
Attorney Bowen's
So-
calling myself. I'm just going to tell him we'll catch up with him later.
So they are compliant with that part of the subpoena. Now, there was more to your subpoena than that, but we'll have to make sure we check what's in the box before we make any discussion. And for the record, the town administrator, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and others are required, as part of the audit process every year, to fill out a form, management's review of operations. And it's an extensive questionnaire. It's about whether or not you've detected any fraud or any other practices and we go through the litany of things that we do every year, which this year we are being assailed by a very significant attempt by some actor somewhere to defraud our unemployment compensation fund by filing false claims. And this is common across municipalities. That was the primary issue I covered in my review of the town's operations. I did note, and I chose my words very carefully, that the Board of Selectmen has concerns about the fiscal controls in a federally subsidized school lunch program that it is reviewing with the school committee and the school administration as part of a formal investigation, with the hope that those issues would either be set aside, that the auditors would come in and say you actually don't have anything to worry about, or fixed if there is need for more fiscal control. So that is part of my report to the auditors. I don't think any auditor worth 5 pennies would read that and not take action on it, so it's my hope that really that's the conduit to get Melanson Heath to roll up their sleeves and do a quick inquiry.
Okay.
It is fundamentally different to say what you have, you can account for what comes in as a matter of accounting, bookkeeping. I got a bill for 20, I paid for 20, because that's acceptable. I ordered 20, I got 20, I paid for 20. That's not the discussion. The discussion is, once it becomes an asset of the town, what steps are taken to preserve the integrity of knowing where everything is and when. So that's the only thing.
Attorney Bowen.
Oh, Rich made it on. So that's all I had to say about it anyway. Go ahead, Rich.
Well, sorry, I cut out right after I heard the town administrator say we just got the emails delivered. That's probably about all I have to say at this point. I do want to get a copy of them so I can go through them. And I think we might have preferred getting them from the source. I mean, that's, from a technical point of view, but we'll start by looking at it and see if we have.
Was there, in your conversations with counsel for the school, I believe part of that subpoena was access and providing proof of an inventory management system. Was that ever provided, or did they just comply to the email portion of the subpoena?
So far, just the email. They said that they were still working on the rest of the material, and that I'd expect to see them in the near future. So we'll see. But yeah, that was definitely part of what was requested.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for counsel?
This came in a box, and
Yeah.
so it's not anything that we could look at. This is,
I would only ask that it stay in the selectman's office, because it's so, I can't reproduce copies for you, it's hundreds of pages. But if you want to look through it, it's in there, and just, what we should do is make an index, so we know how it should be organized, and if anything gets jostled up, we can reorganize it, but other than that, I think it's for your pleasure to look at.
It would make sense to organize that up by recipient, or not
Yeah.
by recipient, by whose mailbox it is.
Further down that road, is there any thought of scanning it in and making it electronic on our end? It would.
Well, maybe, I guess if it's all single-sided, you just put the stack on the scanner and walk away from it, I think we can get you something real fast. If everything's double-sided, it's kind of, we've been having issues with this thing in here, reformatting regular-sized paper onto that big paper that I use for the budget,
Oh.
and making the font tiny. Complaints have been made, but that's just in the back of my mind. In the back of my mind, I want to make sure that you can read it. So I'll look into scanning it. That'll be probably the best solution. I literally got it yesterday afternoon and just haven't had a chance to.
Oh, I didn't, I
To really
wasn't trying
poke
to
it.
imply that we did anything wrong.
No, I just haven't had a chance to even see how it's organized.
Okay. I guess Luke called in a little late. Luke, are you on?
He's muted.
Yeah, I'm here.
So as much as I hate to do this to you, is it possible I could throw you on the next agenda?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
No worries.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your patience.
Yep.
well, is there any reason not to go back to them? We're here.
Well, I mean, unless you, I mean, we could. I hate bouncing around on stuff, but yeah, we can. So Luke had actually reached out to me. You don't need to, if you don't mind, we'll just get into it now, Luke, if that works for you.
Works for me. I like it. And then,
So Luke had reached out to me for ways that he may be able to help us out off of the Economic Development Commission and see if there's ways that that commission could help smooth the way for new businesses coming into town, be it part of a vetting process or welcome packets or putting together permits, applications, and things that they'd need for new businesses as they walk through. But he's looking to increase the involvement of the EDC, or even come up with like the ideas of subcommittees or something like that as it pertains to vetting and bringing new businesses into Douglas. Is that a pretty good summary, Luke?
yeah, we'd like to make sure that the businesses that Douglas is bringing into town are, businesses that we want to be here.
Make sense to you guys?
Yeah, it's pretty vague, but yeah, I mean, we want
Well, I think
business, we want reputable businesses, we want enthusiasm for the town. What exactly are we looking to do?
Well, I think it's trying to help define some of what EDC is doing.
What we're looking to do is to ensure that any business coming into town has been vetted, there's no open public records on those people, there's no issues with failed previous businesses. Like, we just want to look at the people that we're bringing into town and see who they are, and maybe make a recommendation before we get to a place where we've signed agreements with people or things of that nature.
I think some of the vetting process is where this had come from, is like some of the communities, and it's going back to Tim's discussion, where he wanted to have kind of an open dialogue regarding the recreational and medical marijuana businesses that are coming into town. It's not a neighboring community, but like Norton has actually delegated parties from the EDC and various other boards that they have that are going through a full-blown vetting process of these companies that are coming into town and saying, you know, what's the nature of your business, you know, making sure that they can smooth things over, that they've got the financials that they need in order to come in and actually have a successful proposal sitting in front of the Board of Selectmen, as opposed to trying to wing it as we go through.
I guess I'm in favor of anything that would help a business come to town, any legitimate business would come to town, and if we can help them through permitting and, you know, any other pitfalls or hoops they have to jump through, that would be good. I'm not sure that we as a town want to get into a selection process. Is that the term I'm looking for? If somebody wants to come to town and open a legal business.
Yay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, this seems like I don't know, a pretty far reach for a town government that should be welcoming anyone and everyone into town. Who's running legal processes? I don't know if there's necessarily some sort of barometer that a company would have to pass to make the high standards of the town of Douglas. I don't know what your maybe if there's a policy written that we could look at, it might be helpful, but I don't know necessarily if I'm interested in expanding the size of government to ultimately hinder growth in town.
I was examining the government, I'm understanding the side of that. I mean, we're just saying that we would like to change the ingest point for a new conversation so that when a new business comes to town, it comes to the EDC looks at the business and says, have you ever had a business before? How did you do? Where was it? Do you have any foreclosures against you? Like, what's the situation? We want to take a look at the people that we're doing business with before we start doing business with them or get into a position where we're making, you know?
I'm not sure, I'll put the advisability aside. If somebody's had a foreclosure or anything like that, or some kind of business, let's just widen it, call it a business failure.
Sure.
I'm not sure if they've had a business failure, and we can define that any way we want, whether we have the ability to keep them from opening a business in the town. Just because they had a business that failed in Norton, somebody mentioned.
Well,
If they decide to make a clean start here, then I think I'm good with that.
Host community agreement.
I mean, that's different. We've done, as everybody in the room knows, we've done a lot of vetting with all the various marijuana businesses that we've done. And we're not going to start doing any less, I don't think. I don't know if that translates to other businesses.
I think what he wants to do is take the vetting process that the board has been doing and taking it off of our plate, so when a host community agreement opportunity comes to us, it's already been fully vetted and cleaned out.
Who has the obligation to do that? Is there any obligation that we have to do it, or can we sublet it?
What?
This is,
Okay. Hal, I think you're on mute, bud.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I think what we want to differentiate is between businesses that are seeking assistance from the town, like a TIF, or have a project that requires approval from planning board, DBA, et cetera. Somebody putting in a building, but a business coming into town, moving into an existing facility, I don't think that's within our purview. I think involve the EDC makes some sense to do some of the due diligence for projects of that type, and actually to hold the hand of people going through the permitting process.
Right. Hand-holding I'm good with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you, Luke?
Sure does.
So I think what it was is he'd like to have a deeper involvement in trying to help, and in some cases, you know, like you said, hand-holding and help grease some of the skids to.
Oh, absolutely.
So you have the permits and things.
If an incoming business needs help and there's somebody that we can, some way we can provide help, let's do it.
Yeah.
To echo Selectman Bonin, yay.
And on the, I think it was primarily on the more vetting side and doing research and things like that to make sure it's a viable business that's coming in. I think that pertained more towards like some of the vetting that we were taking our time up doing as it pertained to host community agreements, because we only have a limited number, and we want to be cautious as to who we grant those and our licenses to. That's all.
Right, so we shouldn't just.
They do have
leave them like
value.
they don't.
Does that make, was probably a better answer.
Yes, I think we all want the same thing here. I think we're just using different terms to describe it.
Semantic.
Semantics would be exactly right.
So I think we can probably, and like I said, I can get the information out of Norton as to how they're using their EDC, and if they did make a subcommittee off of it.
Right.
And then we can present that at the next meeting and determine how we might want to move forward if we do, if there's an appetite. Does that work for you guys?
Yeah, I think it works for me. I always do better with things that are more specific
Makes sense.
than just sort of a
Maybe
vague
reduce
concept.
it to writing, so we could take a look at it.
Yeah.
I can do that. Does that work for you, Mr. Bonin?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, Luke, I'm going to do some due diligence and grab how, the example community in Norton has been using their EDC, and then I'll ask you to come back at a future meeting. Does that work for you?
Sure does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So, we're on to approved minutes and possible votes.
I'll make a motion, excuse me, that we approve the minutes for our selectmen's meeting on October 20th, 2020.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 I'll make a similar motion that we approve the meeting minutes from October 28th, 2020 meeting.
I'll second it.
I'm sorry. Second.
I already seconded it.
Something wrong with those minutes?
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Your report, Mr. Administrator.
Mr. Chairman, as of this afternoon, we have 13 active COVID cases in the town of Douglas. We started the week off with 14. We had one individual pass away. Another individual ended quarantine, and one new case was reported this afternoon. So after all those changes net out, we went from 14 to 13 active cases. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the family who lost a loved one. In the interest of hoping that maybe that situation helps the public understand the situation with this pandemic. When we looked at the data, we saw, a spread of different addresses around town, different surnames. And this is us being the Emergency Operations Center and sharing information to protect our employees. Those who have grown up here in town, went to high school, and really kind of know how families are connected, after looking at it, the information for a couple of days, realized that, it's one family group, 3 different residences, different last names, but 3 different residences. And so 9 of those 14 cases were actually accounted for by a cluster of family relations. And whether it's true in this situation or not, I'll speak more generally. When we have those in our lives who are vulnerable, and my mother's vulnerable, so she doesn't leave her home. So if my brothers and I are all interacting with her and with each other, if one of my brothers were to get sick and got her sick, then that would get me sick, and my other brother's sick, and that's kind of how things can spread very quickly within a family group, even where you're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to keep vulnerable people in their home and taking turns bringing them groceries, dealing with their laundry and other things. This was why, back early in the spring, we had the food program, so that people wearing PPE were delivering food to someone, and the family didn't have to interact, take that risk of having close contacts. Very hard to see a loved one not go in, talk, take your mask off, hug, whatever. And unfortunately, those simple things can lead to problems. We're probably, since we have this steady caseload, probably looking at going from yellow to red in the state's grading system for towns that are high risk. I thought the superintendent of schools did a very fine job of sending notice home and identifying the thresholds for different actions that he would have to take and where the community stands relative to that. It was a well-researched and informative discussion with the school-age children, people who have school-age children in their homes, to understand there's a little bit of ways to go. You have to be in the red for 3 weeks before there's any kind of mandate that comes out with respect to remote learning versus in-person learning. So we're not that far along yet, and let's hope that we reverse the situation before we get there. But the governor did issue orders this week, and biting my tongue a little bit, we don't have a lot of businesses in town that would typically be open past 9:30, and that would trigger that particular order. And there is a reminder, of course, that everybody should wear their mask and wash their hands frequently and try to maintain social distancing. I think we got through Halloween with no incidents of any significance, a couple of minor ambulance runs. But for these people that have been sick in town, we have done quite a few ambulance transports. And it's complicated because of the infectious nature of the disease, that when that transport is made, when the equipment returns to the garage, it has to be disinfected. It is effectively out of service until it is. And that's why the second ambulance was put on. We expect, because there have been so many transports, that we're very much in the sweet spot for FEMA reimbursement for these costs. So we're not losing very much sleep over the cost element. Between FEMA and CARES Act, we should be able to cover this response. The response has been necessary. We've been working towards the special town meeting and, well, covering all the details that we are required to get us there. In preparation for a conversation about cannabis tonight that we didn't have, I did do a little research that I think might be a good way to frame a conversation for the future in very general terms. I asked the tax assessor, the principal assessor, to review the tax rolls of the town and to provide me with a list of the top 10 taxpayers. This is part of the audit process annually. We don't usually disclose identities and quantities because really there is no, the auditors are looking for, is there a dominant taxpayer that the town is heavily reliant upon? And, you know, think Brayton Power Plant in Somerset, that incredibly, you know, intermingled relationship. The town of Somerset really had big problems when the power plant went out. We don't have that. The tax base is very diversified, and most of the taxpayers are relatively small. The largest taxpayer in the town of Douglas right now is the Gilboa Street mill complex. So Michael DeCaro's building with the envelope factory on the first floor and a cannabis grow on the second. It's about $127,000 a year for the real estate tax portion. You have HCA's with the cannabis grow upstairs, and I sent you a fairly complicated calendar when those payments are due. Let's assume for the sake of argument that it's $180,000 a year. That's the high end. 180 plus 127, the largest taxpayer in town is about $300,000, $307,000. The next largest taxpayer after that is National Grid at about 110. The next one after that would be the entire, and I mean this good-naturedly, and the entire Tessino empire. So GBI, Riddlebrook, I think it's called Rydellbrook Development, and then his own personal holdings. All those entities taken together, he is the third largest taxpayer in town. A single cannabis retail shop with an HCA and bringing in top-line revenues that are not unusual for the industry, about $10.7 million a year, top line, if they're paying 3% in the tax and 3% for an impact fee to the town, they're paying about $600,000 into the town, making them the largest taxpayer in town by a factor of 2, and larger than the second largest taxpayer in town by a factor of 6. So the conversation about the cannabis industry for a small town like Douglas is hugely important, because you really are, if you have 2 successful retail enterprises in town, you're basically covering what used to be the top 10 taxpayers in town with just 2 taxpayers, and significantly changing the dynamic of our revenue outlook. Buried in that conversation, there's a very important fiscal management conversation. If the impact fees will only last for 5 years under the law, you should not incorporate them into your ongoing operating budget forecast, because they won't be there 5 years from now, and you don't want to put the town into a position where it falls off a cliff, because that's a lot of money that would disappear. So we're hoping to have a conversation with FinCom, the Board of Selectmen, town meeting, everybody who cares to have the conversation about how to manage those proceeds in a way that maximizes the benefit to the town and doesn't create an unnecessary or avoidable reliance upon an unstable source of revenue going forward. I thought that was kind of interesting, because I was trying to get a sense of this whole drama around the Webster Street property. If you go back to what the town did, really, frankly, you were treated very poorly by the owner. He leveraged you against DCR to get the deal he wanted, then he reneged on the deal to the town. The town went through eminent domain. Then the town was sued for the pro tanto satisfaction of the value on the land and settled that lawsuit. This hasn't been an easy project from the beginning, and Hal will remember better than I will, because I wasn't here, but Hal, this is probably 8 years in the making. So whatever it was, it's taken a long time just to get to this point, and there are decisions to be made in the future. That's all I had for you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. All right. Does anybody on the board have any open session topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of the meeting?
I do not.
No? No? Mr. Davis?
No?
At this point, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much.